All right, welcome to class today. I'm Professor Scott Sampson, for those of you in the TV audience here, and this is one of my great sections of the Business Management 361 course. And we've talked about lean in this class, and today we're going to talk about lean specifically in the context of services. The chapter talked about lean services a little bit, but it was perhaps didn't make as much sense. In fact, the chapter actually did point out that lean is usually applied in process industries where we have continuous flow or assembly lines or so forth. We have relatively stable production. And that's the primary context in which we study lean, usually. But what I want to do today is talk about how this applies specifically in service context and what it means in terms of how we design services and how we think about service strategy. So this idea of lean services will really integrate some things we talked about previously in the semester. Here's an outline for the presentation today, so you kind of know where I'm going with this. I'm going to actually cover three things. The first thing I'm going to talk about is lean. Then after we talk about lean, we will then talk about services. And then after that, we're going to talk about lean services. Yeah! Lean. What is lean? We've covered lean the last couple of class periods. Last class period we did the Gazago exercise. That was a lean exercise. The intention of that exercise is to help us study and observe some things about lean production. What is lean? From the last few class sessions, what do you observe? Please.
It's just removing waste from given activities in a supply chain or in operations.
Okay. And what is waste?
Someone else?
Yeah. What?
Non-value-adding activities.
Okay, non-value-added activities. Excellent. And what do we define as, in this context? What is value-adding? How do we know if something's value-adding?
The customer will buy it.
Yeah, the customer will buy it. Or even more specifically, the book didn't talk about this very much, but it's almost implied, is that whatever we offer provides value to the customer. That the customer sees that it's actually going to fill one of their needs in a way that perhaps is superior to the way other needs, other alternatives to fill that particular need. So that idea of value, or customers' intent to purchase and so forth, is really used as the basis for defining what waste is or what waste is in an organization. Excellent. So lean is a philosophy for the elimination of waste. So I searched online for this idea of waste, and this guy came up here, although I don't know if that's the same spelling as waste. We eliminate things and provide value to customers. This was actually a before and after. I didn't know if this was a real picture or if they just did some Photoshop. We preserve value with less work. So the idea of lean, sometimes people think of lean as meaning, we cut costs and so forth. There are elements of that, of cutting costs out of the system, but not necessarily to sacrifice the value proposition, to sacrifice what it is of high quality, high value that we're providing to the customer. It's focused on just-in-time thinking, so the book talked about that. We talked about that previously. The just-in-time idea is that we kind of manage our resources, that we don't have excess resources or wasted resources. We have the resources we need just as we need them. And then we have various tools that we're talking about in the book that we looked at, we talked about in class. We talked about Kanban, we talked about Pokio previously, and so forth. 5 S's we actually didn't cover, but that's one of the methodologies or frameworks for lean. So we have various methodologies there. So that's kind of this idea of lean. I think the students, this is very impressive that you've summarized it very well. Those of you that described that, thank you. So, what are services? Well, services have a lot of definitions. In my course, I'm pretty adamant about my perspective on service. What are services? Anyone? What is a service? A service operation, a service supply chain, please.
Service is like production cycle, except where you're using customer resources in order to produce something.
Excellent. So services are producing something based on customer resources. It could be customer selves, their belongings, their information. Other thoughts about that?
You can't take it home and use it later.
Okay. You can't take a service home?
Well, you said it's something that you have to consume right then.
Okay, simultaneous production and consumption. It's the idea that you're somehow or other tied to the organization. Now, in fact, if you go in to have, for example, auto repair, you can take your car home afterwards, but the repair process requires some engagement where you're actually tied to the organization. Okay, good. So that idea of simultaneous production and consumption also makes us think about the issue of interaction, which we talked about previously quite a bit in the course. In fact, this is a brief review, since you have this due in the next few weeks, your PCN diagrams. I have a few PCN diagram examples here. Okay, so we have process entities. So we have a diagram that represents the processes that an organization is involved in. We have the process domain, the processes that are under the responsibility performed by the entity. We have the idea of direct interaction, which is processes that involve interaction with other entities. We say that interaction idea. So we have surrogate interaction, where we're acting on other entities' resources. It could be equipment, technologies, and so forth. And then we have this region of independent processing, where we're working independently from other entities. So we've talked about this before. Now, if we think about this in terms of multiple entities, here we have a provider, here we have a customer. Where is service represented in the process domain of providers and customers? Jacob?
The middle part.
Okay. So the service domain is the interactive processing. It actually can include surrogate interaction, but it's really between, it's the border between entities, interaction between entities. So over here we have a firm's actions that might be represented in a PCN diagram. We could have over here customers' actions, the things the customer is doing independently, and some things that we do jointly or co-productive, meaning that the customer and the firm are working together in production. That's the service domain. So let's look at an example of an automobile. So Toyota makes cars, and they produce them in factories, they produce them independently. Even though customers may provide feedback in terms of desired characteristics and so forth, market research, information, the fact is the cars are produced independently. The customer, Toyota or their dealer would sell the car to a customer. That's usually an interactive type of process. Face-to-face interaction, and then the customer drives the car, that's independent. So we start out with something that's not co-productive, so we just call that simply a production process. We have something that is co-productive, it's interactive, which is again a service. And then finally, we have something that's not co-productive, which we, in this case, call it a consumption process. So Craig mentioned this earlier, this idea of simultaneous production and consumption. So here's where we really see that simultaneous production and consumption. Here we see consumption, but it's not done interactively. It's independent consumption. Now, this term consumption has broader meaning than it used to. We used to think of consumption as meaning like, you eat a piece of bread, you consume that. You don't consume a car necessarily. The idea of consumption is more closely aligned, at least in the way we use it today, with the realization of value, which means that we meet our needs through that particular product. Okay? So here we have service, and then we have independent processing. Knee surgery, one last example here. Here we have a patient that damages their knee. We have a healthcare provider that procures an artificial knee, okay, independently. They come together in an interactive process. Sorry for the board there, but replacing the knee. And then the customer then uses the knee independently. So again, we have regions here, not co-productive. We have the co-productive, the service process, and then a consumptive process or a need-filling process that's done independently. Does that make sense? So we've kind of reviewed that before. All right, so back to where we were. We've talked about lean. We've talked about services. So that leads to this issue of what are lean services. The textbook had a section on lean services, but it didn't really tell what they were. It instead more focused on different types of methodologies or approaches people would have. So what I want to do is really talk about what lean services are in this slide, and also lead us to understanding how we produce lean services or how we make a service lean. So lean, in summary, is waste reduction, it's keeping value at lower cost, which some of the class members have mentioned. Service, it's provider-customer interaction. This idea of co-production, that a customer and a provider are working together to fill a need. Now the question becomes, if services are aligned with interaction, is there value? Is there cost in interaction? Do we like to interact? So think about that. Think for yourself. When you go out to eat, do you like to interact or would you rather not interact? What do you think? Any thoughts about that?
It depends on what you eat.
Okay, explain.
For example, I mean, if I go to a really fancy restaurant that has a really great steak,
Yes.
I will not talk to somebody who just want to eat it.
Yes. What's a situation where you would like to talk to somebody? Or you would like to interact? Please, Chantel?
Like Benihana.
Okay. Oh, Benihana, yes. So have you studied Benihana in some class, or have you been to Benihana?
I've been.
So explain Benihana for those that haven't.
It's basically like a Japanese steakhouse, and they cook the food in front of you, and they're flipping knives. And I just remember I was annoyed because they kept putting shrimp tails in my water. And I was like, why would I want shrimp tails in my water? That was the only thing I was annoyed by. Otherwise, it was entertaining.
Okay. So there's an entertainment element. So in fact, at Benihana, that's an interesting example. Benihana, if you looked at the bill, and a typical meal at Benihana might cost $25. What percent of that is really going for the food, and what percent of that is going for the interaction?
Probably like half and half.
Yeah, maybe half and half. So half of the amount that you pay would actually be paying for that interaction, having the people put shrimp in your water and laugh about that. Or maybe some people find shrimp in the water kind of an exotic kind of Japanese thing. Obviously, I don't. Does that make sense? Okay, so there we're actually paying for interaction. But Jeremy brought up this point. Have you ever been to a restaurant where the waiter or waitress insists on interacting and you don't want to interact? I actually had this happen over here at the brick oven, and I like the brick oven a lot. But I had a business meeting one day, and we had some people getting together. We actually wanted to get off campus so that we could have this meeting and without having any type of interruption. And the waiter kept coming to our table, telling jokes, and wanting to tell us about all the specials and all this type of thing. And I said, "Go away! You're driving me crazy here." I think he was trying to get a good tip, but ultimately it was kind of hurting the delivery, because that particular interaction, sometimes where I like to hear about the specials and I like to interact, from that particular situation, it wasn't value added. Does that make sense? So what I want to do with this today is think about lean in terms of lean interactions. Because those interactions, those customer-provider interactions, are really at the core of what makes services distinctive in terms of a process, in terms of a business offering. Those interactions. So, please.
Would you say that variability is kind of a core part of this lean services and trying to manage your variability between who you're working with or the employees that you're kind of facing the customer?
That's actually a very good question. The question having to do with variability, because if we look at lean, and even in our chapter discussion and study of lean, is that a lot of lean is reducing variability and driving it out of the system. We have different techniques we put in place. We use Kanban systems to kind of keep our flow kind of managed and controlled, and we have ways of reducing variability that might be introduced in the quality of our products and so forth. In services, the challenge is if we focus our lean efforts on reducing variability, what happens to the offering? And in fact, very often services are very customized. They're very, because of that, either the need for interaction or the need for customers to have specific needs to be fulfilled, the variability winds up being at the core of that offering. So let me give an example. Legal services. If you go to a law firm and pay them, for example, to put together a contract for you, well, if they wanted to be lean in the low variability sense, they might just give you a contract that's just a standard off-the-shelf contract that they've sold to a dozen other clients. However, it might not meet your needs. So in fact, variability reduction can actually introduce greater costs in terms of unsatisfied needs of the customer. Another example is healthcare. If you go back to the early 80s, I remember HMOs, health maintenance organizations, were a really big thing. Managed healthcare, because healthcare costs got out of control. So what happened was there's organizations that would have these managed health organizations that would work on a fixed fee, and they have customers come in almost as an assembly line. I mean, I actually had my employer at the time actually use one of these big health maintenance organizations in California. And the problem is they were so efficient in delivering their health care and driving out that variability that the patients would have recurring problems. They'd have to keep coming back because it wasn't solved the first time. So that's why we have to be careful about equating lean service with reducing variability, because in fact, very often in service offerings, it's that variability, it's that customer variability that's the core of the offering. Does that make sense? Excellent question. Any other questions about this? All right, so I'm going to present 4 concepts having to do with lean services. So we're thinking of lean services as being managing our interactions. And there's 4 concepts that we'll use to manage those interactions. One is enhancing our strategic interactions, and I'll define that in the next slide. The second one is eliminating wasteful interactions, those interactions that don't provide value. Enabling customers to self-serve or DIY. What's DIY? Do it yourself. Okay, so enabling customers to meet their own needs. And 4 is extending our offering outside the firm. And what this means is that we can actually be able to meet customer needs with resources that are not controlled by our organization. Okay, so we have enhance, eliminate, enable, and extend. And these are what I call the 4 E's of lean service. Kind of a mnemonic there. So, what are the 4 E's? Let's go through these, and for the remaining time, I want to take you through some examples of these. So first, we have enhancing strategic interactions. So we talked about strategy earlier in the course, this idea that strategy really ultimately defines what we do as a firm. What is our value proposition? Who are we? What business are we in? So strategic, when I use the term strategic in this context, what I really mean is those things that are central to our chosen value proposition. What business we decide to be in. We focus on the interactions that contribute to this value proposition, and not only focus on them, but we actually apply resources and we apply planning to enhance them. So we might plan our interactions, we might script our interactions. Organizations that practice lean services according to this model typically plan out every one of their interactions that they have between employees and customers, between customers and the firm's technologies and so forth. They don't leave things to chance. As much as we like to empower our employees to let them kind of wing it and make up their scripting as they go along, that can be very dangerous in terms of lean because it can introduce unwanted variability and introduce interactions that are not productive. So we might simplify our interactions as well. So let me give some examples of these. The first example I give is Amazon. Now, do any of you shop with Amazon? What do you like about Amazon? What business is Amazon in? What do you go to Amazon for? Anyone? Who's at Amazon? Please.
I go there for almost everything.
Okay. Like what?
Like anything, like toys for my son.
Okay, toys.
Or technology stuff.
Technology.
Ebooks.
Books. E-books, though, so you're a technology person here with the iPad. Now, do you actually use the Kindle?
I do have the Kindle app on my
To
iPad.
download the books there? Yeah, we're getting to this point now where it seems like books are becoming kind of old-fashioned here. So originally, Amazon started out in the book business, selling paper-bound books. Then they expanded. Okay, clothing. Are you wearing anything now that you bought from Amazon?
Not the clothing.
Okay. Well, they have fashion there. Toys, you mentioned. I didn't really realize that they sold toys.
Got our Halloween costumes.
Halloween costumes, appliances, sporting goods, and so forth. So Amazon really sells a lot of things. Who does Amazon compete with? Now, you're pretty loyal to Amazon, aren't you?
Yeah.
If you didn't purchase these types of things from Amazon, where would you get them?
eBay. Somewhere else on the internet.
Okay, maybe eBay. Where else would you get them? Where?
Newegg.
Walmart. Does Walmart compete? Can you get the same things at Walmart?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much all the same things that Amazon sells. Who else competes with Amazon? Costco. Target. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of retailers, just big box retailers, compete with Amazon. What I would argue is that selling books and selling sporting goods and toys and so forth, that's not really the center of their value proposition. Because if that was their center of the value proposition, they would be really no better than Walmart or eBay or the other alternatives. What is it about Amazon that we're really buying? What is it that Amazon provides to you better than anybody else that makes you loyal to Amazon?
Two things that Amazon gives me. One is that I'm an Amazon Prime member.
Okay.
So I get free 2-day shipping on everything I order.
Whoa.
So I can get everything shipped straight to my door and it's there really fast. And then the other thing is that I have an Amazon Rewards Visa. And so I actually get free stuff every couple of months.
Okay. So you're tied in through some loyalty programs.
Yeah.
Actually,
It's super convenient.
okay, it's super convenient as well. So, in fact, you actually have hyper convenience there, it sounds like. Please, Jenny?
Yeah, I was gonna say convenience. I mean, you don't have to go anywhere. All you have to do is open your laptop and buy something right there. Where
Yes.
you are.
Now, actually, it's that convenience that I would actually have to call into question. So I think I'm going to have to agree with you that really convenience is what the product is. You can get the physical products from a lot of different retailers, but Amazon really does this in a hyper, super convenient way. And an example of this causes me a little bit of concern, but I actually bought something from Amazon last week. And whenever I go onto Amazon to buy something, they always come up with this thing that says, buy now with one click. And I never do it. Do you ever use the one click?
Not usually because I have all my information saved, so it's like 3 clicks.
Oh, 3 clicks. So I use the 3-click method. But I don't like the 1-click method. Why? What's the problem with the 1-click method?
You don't know what it is.
Well,
You don't see it first. You don't see your
Yeah.
order first, and
Well-
you might have second thoughts.
second thoughts, yeah. I like a cooling off period, you know? I like to put it in my shopping cart and leave it there for 3 or 4 days and come back and say, do I really want this? What I actually found when I do that is, after 3 or 4 days, it'll come in and say, the price of this just went up. It's like, oh, darn it, I should have bought it before. But sometimes actually the price will come down. I assume they tell you that as well. But what Amazon did is they provided, again, this is the idea of enhancing. They provided resources for the customer that simplified the process. That with one click, and if you have the Amazon app on your phone, which I actually have on my phone, I can actually just click on the button and it will order, it'll, place an order for whatever it is I've selected there. So this is an example of lean, but it's not lean in eliminating, but in enhancing. They're actually enhancing something that's very strategic. Because convenience is strategic. If Jeff Bezos has to make a decision about where we put our resources, he really needs to focus on those interactions that provide value to customers that are distinctive value. Please, Peter?
So they don't eliminate wasteful interaction?
Well, we'll look at other examples. They do that as well. This is just an example of enhancing. So I'll give some other examples of eliminating stuff. Not with Amazon. Does this make sense? Okay, now actually an example for Amazon where you could say they would eliminate a wasteful interaction is I had a student tell me that they had an item that they needed to return to Amazon. How do you return? Did anybody ever return anything to Amazon before? How do you return things to Amazon? Devin?
You say that you want to return it, and then they give you a label that you can turn off.
Yeah.
And then you just put it on the box, and you send it back when you send it.
How do you say that you want to return it?
Well, they give you an option to say.
Do you call up someone and tell
No, you
them?
just go online to your account and go to
Yeah.
this previous purchase, select it, and be like, I want to return it
Yeah.
for this reason, and then they'll just print everything off for you.
Yeah. Does that make sense? That's an example of Amazon doing, I didn't have that example on my slides, of an eliminating step, is that calling them up and getting a return authorization number. Have you ever had to do that with some other company? That's always a pain. You have to call up and say, and tell them what was wrong with it, and then they'll say, okay, here's your number, and do it like this. They make it very difficult. So Amazon actually eliminated, in terms of the return process, they eliminated a lot of steps, allowing customers, or enabling customers, to produce their own shipping label and information to get through those returns. Okay, excellent example. All right, let's look at another example. This is a credit union. It's actually my credit union, America First. And it's like most banks or credit unions. They have tellers, they have drive-in windows and things like that to provide convenience. But one of the things that they try to do is really compete on lower rates and for loans and higher rates for savings. So one of the things that's strategic for this credit union, America First Credit Union, is the process and the interactions that it takes to set up new accounts and to help people transfer their credit card balances from some other bank over to America First Credit Union. So what they did to enhance this is they set up this switch hotline you can call, and they'll help you with some very easy steps. They'll have somebody assist you in moving your account from some other bank to American First Credit Union. So again, this is an example of enhancing because they're putting resources in an interaction that's very strategic for this credit union because of the way that they would define themselves. Does that make sense? All right, so we've talked about enhancing interactions. Let's look at some eliminating interactions. So we reduce or eliminate interactions that don't contribute to our value proposition. We sometimes can use technology or surrogate interactions to do that. So we can replace face-to-face interactions with maybe person-to-technology interactions. And we can also reduce interactions by scripting and measurement. Think about your experience going to, I have actually a picture of this, I should have put it up, but In-N-Out Burger. Have any of you been to In-N-Out Burger? What's the experience like placing an order at In-N-Out Burger? It's highly conversational? No. When you go in, they have an exact script. And it is amazing how fast their line is. In fact, their line at the ordering desk is, it doesn't matter how many people are in it, it just clears just like that. Because they script that. It's very tightly defined. And I think further, some organizations will actually measure their employees based on their throughput of customers, meaning they provide a measurement incentive to their employees to reduce unnecessary interactions. A great example of that is Costco. Costco, if you go into a Costco store and go over by their employee break room, you'll usually see a poster there that will list their processing times, the number of transactions or barcode scans per minute for their cashiers. What do you think a typical barcode scan per minute of a cashier at Costco would be? How many items per minute do you think a typical employee scans? 10 items, 30 items? Actually, the last I looked, the one that was the leader on the board had 96 items per minute. Now, if you're measuring number of items scanned per minute, how does that impact the kind of conversations you have with the customers at Costco? Not much conversation. In fact, on occasion, I'll actually run into somebody that I know at Costco. And it's like, they will not engage in conversation because it will decrease the effectiveness of their items per minute measure. Now, we also eliminate interactions by independent processing, you do it yourself, which is actually the next item, is by enabling customers to meet their own needs. So sometimes we have things that we might do through interaction that we discover the customer can actually do better themselves. So I'll give you some examples of those in a minute. We facilitate them meeting their own needs. We provide them with tools, resources, and knowledge that they need to meet their needs. So one example of this is Federal Express. I like Federal Express because, for example, if I order something with Amazon and I need it in a hurry, I can be pretty confident that I'm going to get it in a couple of days. But have any of you ever ordered anything by Federal Express that didn't show up when you thought it was going to show up? Any of you had that experience? What happened, Ben?
I ordered a textbook.
Okay.
That was supposed to be 2-day shipping. I paid like $30 for 2-day shipping to get it there for a class a couple semesters ago, and it took like 3 weeks.
Wow.
I called them up and they actually refunded my the extra $30 I spent because I waited for extra.
That $30, do you feel like that adequately compensated you for not having delivered that textbook when you needed it? Yeah, maybe not. You miss out on, in that situation, a textbook, you might miss out on preparing for quizzes or class sessions or things like that. So you mentioned in that particular case, you actually called them up on the phone. And when did you call them up? Was it as it was in shipping during the 2 days, or was it after the 2 days had passed and more time had passed?
Yeah, I gave them about 5 days. I wasn't, as long as I gave myself about a week, but I needed the textbook. So
Yeah.
After about 7 or 8 days, I was set up.
So by that point, we talked about this in the quality chapter, the idea of external failure. At that point, they had failed, the damage had been done, you're upset with Federal Express, it probably wasn't a pleasant conversation.
They did refund my money.
But they did refund your money. So the idea is that sometimes, like here's an example, we had this situation where we're waiting for something, we're kind of looking out the window. I bought something from Amazon actually just last week. It's something that my son and I are going to use together, my 10-year-old, and he's just asking me about this. How many days till it shows up? I did 5 to 8 day shipping, and so he's kind of standing there at the window. One alternative that Federal Express could do, and they actually do, is they have call centers. You can call them up, as you did, talk to the people to solve their problems. The problem is, with call centers, customers are probably not going to call the call center until it's already turned into a problem. just because of the inconvenience, being on hold, and so forth. So in what way does Federal Express enable customers to solve their need of knowing where their product is without having to have costly interactions with an employee? Please, Adam?
Do online tracking.
Okay, online tracking. Now, have you used online tracking? How does that work, that online tracking? How does
They every time a package is moved from one facility to another or on or off the truck, then it's scanned.
Yeah.
And so they can update the system online. You can see exactly where your product is.
So at any point, you can actually go online, put in the tracking numbers, and it'll give you a printout, it'll give you a list of where the item is, kind of play by play. Please.
It's just kind of funny, because just yesterday, I was walking home from school, and there is my friend who's in my ward, who lives in the same apartment complex. His wife was outside, and I was like, hey, kind of talking to her, I was like, what are you doing? She was, I'm waiting for UPS, and I'm supposed to get it. So I said it on the online feed.
Oh, is that right?
And, like, as we were standing there, the UPS man came and got it.
Wow.
I was like, she like was able to wait for it because of that.
So maybe, I mean, at this point, we don't have GPS coordinates. We have kind of, warehouse locations or shipping locations. But maybe at some point, they have like a little Google map there, a little dot there. Okay, it's coming, it's going down the street. Uh-oh, he just stopped at Krispy Kreme for a donut. Okay, here's going again there. Something like that, please.
That'd be nice. I mean, it was probably a little ways before they did that, but I remember one time I got one, and they had it out for delivery for about 4 days. Like, it was in my hometown, and it was labeled out for delivery.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I don't live that far away.
So it gets stuck on one of the items there. So let me ask you a question about this. Well, actually, let me mention one other thing. I wasn't aware they had this, but I just saw this when I looked it up just yesterday. Is they have this email notification thing. You can actually put in your email address and tell, it'll actually tell you, I'll send you an email message with every time I get it scanned as it goes through the system. It'll give you updates. And I think there's probably also a Federal Express app on the iPhones that you can use as well. So let me ask you this question, this idea of lane service. So Federal Express went from a costly system of call centers to a less costly system of having the customers check their own tracking independently, a self-serve system. Which do you prefer as FedEx customers? How many of you would prefer to talk to somebody in the call center? How many of you would prefer to just do it yourself? Yeah, see, look at that. Now, granted, there may be some generations, the younger people, not like us, we're all young here, but the older generations, we'll call them the silver-haired, no, I can't do that. The older generations, they may still want to talk to a person. But I think as we look in society today, self-service is becoming more and more popular, and in fact, the preferred mode of delivery. Does that make sense? Please.
Actually, I had an experience where not only did they give us the ability to look it up, but when we ordered I think it was a MacBook for my wife, it got stuck in customs in China. And so we didn't even know that, but they just sent us an email and said, your computer's stuck in customs in China, we'll notify you as soon as it's out of there. And then they notified us when it was in, And so instead of Ben's example, we knew right away that it wasn't going to get there on time, but it was because they kept us posted without us even requesting it.
Yes. So it's interesting, this idea of having that type of information available and the access that we have as customers to that information. If we had to call up the call center every time to find out what the status of that is, we just wouldn't do it. We'd be dissatisfied customers. But the fact that we can check that ourselves and we have tie into those updates, I think adds a lot of value. Does that make sense? Okay, another example, self-check-in at the airport. Now, you're all used to that now. When you do self-check-in, it's ubiquitous. Pretty much everywhere you go these days, they expect you to do self-check-in. But it hasn't been that many years when they introduced this technology. And I remember when I first went to the Salt Lake Airport and they had this self-check-in thing, and I thought, I'm not going to use that thing. I'm just going to go to the desk. I don't want to have to hassle with this technology. I went all the way up to the desk, and they said, hey, I'm sorry, we can't help you. You have to check in first. I said, well, can't I check in here? He says, no. They actually had an employee go with me to the self-check-in station, and they actually said, okay, you push here, you touch this. Okay, let's see your passport. We scan the passport. Made me feel like an idiot. Like I'm like, here I am being kind of walked through this process as though I can't figure it out myself. So the next time I got to the airport, do you think I went to the desk first and had one of those people follow me after the house? No. I went straight to the technology and I did it myself, which turns out to be, again, a win-win in terms of the value proposition. it actually reduces the cost of interaction that Delta or other airlines have to experience, but it also actually increases the value. And I found for myself, I actually prefer to use that than actually interact with the person if I can. Please.
One thing that people often bring up as a negative to this is that it eliminates jobs. How would you, as like a services kind of guy, how would you counter that argument and say, no, it doesn't necessarily eliminate jobs, it just changes the job description?
Well, from the frame of reference of lean services, lean is not about just cutting costs, cutting jobs, but cutting jobs. Remember, the first point of the lean services is enhance, meaning that we still want to have interactions, but we put those interactions, we have our human resources focus on those interactions that are value adding. So, sure, we may have to, because we're using this technology, we may have to operate with fewer check-in employees. But however, we might supplement that by providing other employees in other areas where we might have problems, such as boarding and gates and other kinds of areas.
So you would say that it becomes a leveling act where you say, okay, well, we can eliminate the check-in people considering they're not really adding that much value.
Yes.
And instead we'll add in a bunch of technicians to make sure that the planes are ready to go faster.
That's right.
So you're continuing to add value.
Exactly. So think about lean service not in terms of, again, just reduction, but in a shift.
Okay.
We shift our focus and our resources on those things that are part of our value proposition. Excellent question. Kaj?
This just reminds me of an example. My dad likes to take me to the movies a lot,
Mhm.
and at some of the theaters you can just choose your seats on the screen all on your own.
Yes.
I like to go do that, but my dad, he likes to just go up and flirt with the whatever girls sending tickets out, and if there's no cute girls over there, he'll go to the machine. It's kind of funny.
That's interesting. So that you go tell them afterwards, you say, hey, you're lucky he came up here because he just doesn't buy tickets from anybody.
He actually says that too, and he'll spend like 5 minutes just talking with the person in front of the line.
Interesting.
So it's just kind of a thought, day-to-day dead, not long ago, that our lives are getting so interactive that we don't know how to interact.
Yes.
And so I was just thinking why would it be MPC and it's the missionaries aren't able to communicate anymore, and it's like this degeneration of society where we can't talk to people anymore. I mean, my cousin nowadays plays Xbox with a little thing on his head that he's talking with his buddy. I thought of when I was a kid, we had the whole neighborhood over to play Donkey Kong on my Super Nintendo.
Yes.
And we got together to do things. But do you think this could also be a bad thing for society in general?
Actually, interestingly, this issue about reducing interaction, again, this idea that, as I define lean service, I actually wrote an article on this past year, is that there are interactions that are value-adding and those that are not value-adding. And my belief is if we can understand lean service, we can have our needs filled, but also have more time for interactions that are really value-adding. In fact, in this article, I actually suggested things like we might spend more time with our family and friends actually interacting. Now, I'm not implying that's a Facebook interaction. I'm saying maybe even face-to-face types of interactions. But again, the idea is a shift in interactions. How much value do you get out of interacting with the people where you get your car repaired or at the bank or things like that? Probably relatively little value out of that. How much value do you get out of interacting with your friends and neighbors and family and so forth? So what I would think is lean service is not about eliminating interactions, but about shifting interactions from areas of little value to areas of greater value. Good question. Was there one other hand here? All right, so let's do a couple other examples here. So this is enabling. Here's the healthcare facility, Intermountain Healthcare, where my physician's office. And as you come in, one of the first things you do is you wait until the person's free and check in. But they actually set up not too long ago these little kiosks here where you can actually check in without having to talk to a person. And I suspect you probably can also update your insurance information and things like that if you need to. Okay, so we have enhancing strategic interactions, eliminate the non-value interactions. We enable customers to do things themselves, and the fourth part of this is extending the offering outside the firm. This is the idea of, it relates to what we talked about previously in this semester, of linking to other firms or other organizations that meet complementary needs, or it's what Richard Norman called the value constellations. We read that article at the start of the semester. A value constellation is the idea that we have a network or a constellation of firms that work together to satisfy the customer needs, allowing each particular firm to focus on what their expertise is and what their specialty is. Does that make sense? So let me give you a few examples of that. This is a place where I actually take my car to have it repaired. It's a body shop called Harmon's, and they do auto body work. When I went in the front door here, one of the first things I saw at the front desk is they have this big display of cards and things. They have an auto repair thing, a transmission thing. They have up here an insurance something or other. They have different rental cars. They have different types of services that if you come in to have your car repaired, they can help refer you and make connections to other services that can help you out. Does that make sense? Another example, this is Asda. Are you familiar with Asda? Have you been to Asda? What is Asda?
Asda is like Walmart.
Okay.
It's like England's Walmart.
It's England's Walmart.
Yeah.
And in fact, Walmart actually bought Asda a number of years ago, and when I went to Asda for my first time, I thought, wow, it was kind of the Walmart experience. But there was a little bit of a difference. They have a lot of items, a lot of variety, relatively low prices. But as I was checking out, what do you see at most, grocery stores or big box retailers at the checkout? What kind of things do you have there at the checkout?
Candy.
Gum, batteries, magazines, junk like that, impulse items. Well, here's what they have at Asda. This is actually the display at the checkout at Asda. You can actually get life insurance, home insurance. If you're over 50, you can get life insurance. You can get cat insurance here. They actually had dog insurance too, but for some reason they must have been sold out on dog insurance.
Did you snap this picture?
What's that?
Did you snap this picture?
Yes, I took a picture. In fact, I actually have an Asda SIM card. My UK cell phone is an Asda phone, using Asda Mobile. They offer financial services and such like that. Now, do you honestly think Asda has their own cell towers or their own insurance division and stuff? I don't think so. What they've done is partnered with other organizations to help meet customer needs for the kind of customers that come in. So I happen to need a cell phone. It saved me a trip to another store. So when I was there buying my groceries, I got my cell phone SIM card. Please.
Is it still branded as Asda?
Yes.
So they're able to brand these things as Asda, and yet the service that is actually provided is by another company.
Yeah. So I called them up to register my phone or something like that. They said, thank you for calling Asda Mobile. But it's actually offered by some other firm.
Right.
Does that make sense? So it's an example of these kind of networks. So the thing I want to conclude with, I only have a couple minutes, but I'm going to quickly take you through a case study of retail. The case study is, let me skip this, it's actually IKEA. So we've talked about IKEA earlier in the semester. I'm kind of coming back to it because it was such a great example. We can compare IKEA to a traditional furniture retailer, and I just want to take you through IKEA's value proposition with a few slides here and show how they do lean services. So I actually took these pictures myself this past year. Some of them I actually took a couple weeks ago. When I went to IKEA a couple weeks ago, as I came in, I saw the sign. Nothing particularly unusual about that. When I got in the store, I didn't realize this until this time, is they actually have lockers there that you can use to put, whatever you have with you don't want to carry through the store. As you get to the entrance, they have this big stairway. How many of you have been to the IKEA in Salt Lake? Familiar with this? Okay, number of you have. Well, as you go in, there's this escalator that takes you up to the showroom. At the bottom of the escalator, they actually have these bags. They'll say, borrow a yellow bag to carry your stuff with as you go through the store. As you're going up the escalator, there's actually a sign there. You can drop your kids off. So here's two of my kids here. They have this thing called Small Land or something like that. It's a kids' play place there. The kids can watch movies or play toys and things like that. They have, going up the stairs, they have a sign that says, it's okay, you can bring things back if you buy anything. They have a very liberal and easy return policy there. They have a sign there that shows you how to get to the store. I was actually looking for a microwave oven, so I wanted to get to kitchen and dining here. So they have a map of how to get through the store here, and these cool little shortcuts if you can find them, and you know the password. They have signs that will give you brochures with the map on it, some pencils here that you can actually use to make a shopping list, or you can play miniature golf. If you're playing miniature golf, you can write down your score with these. And then they have some rulers here. They have lots of signs all over the store providing customers information. How to choose a chair. If you want to buy a chair, there's 3 easy steps to buy a work chair. If you need more help, you buy too much stuff, you can borrow a cart, carry them around. They have these planning tables here. So here's a guy. Now who's this guy using the planning table? Is that an employee? No. They're actually for the customers. There's actually a sign on the table that says, you know better than anyone else what you need. Do your own planning with the tools we offer here. They had food. I went to get some food, and they have the sign that says, "Why should I clear my own table?" They have instructions about how to clear your own table there. Going down to the restrooms, they have a sign which helps you find the restrooms. But they have these signs down here. I actually took a picture of these signs. It says, "Why isn't there always an assistant when I need one?" Because the information's on the price tag. Why should I deliver my own furniture? Why do I have to assemble it myself? And then they have this courtesy phone. If you need to transport your things back to your apartment or your home, here's a phone. You can call your own cab and get the cab to come pick you up. You can do it all yourself. You don't have to. They have signs about pickup and delivery, delivery services, assembly services. The interesting thing about these is IKEA doesn't actually do any of these things. They have independent companies that they outsource it to. They arrange the delivery service. They arrange the assembly service for you. And then you check out, they have lots of self-service lines there. Actually, there's a sign that said coworkers only beyond this point. I didn't know if I was a coworker. I was doing so much in that store. So let me just summarize this. What I want to do is just conclude by summarizing how IKEA does lean service. Okay? So first, they enhance. So when you browse the showroom, how do they enhance the service? They provided you with maps to help you out. In using the item, they provide a deliver return policy. Eliminate. How do they eliminate getting advice and asking questions? Well, they provide signage about that. They provide the planning stations so that you can get your own advice from the system. They enable customers to make their selections. They provide the pencils and the rulers. They transporting the items. They provide the bags and the carts. Purchasing. They have self-checkout. They transportation options. You can arrange your own transportation options. When you assemble it, you have to do that yourself. They extend it. Transporting the items. They have delivery services that they can arrange. They have assembly services that they arrange, and so forth. So to summarize, they enhance strategic interactions, focusing on their strategy. Tightly defined interactions. They eliminate the non-value-added interactions. No salespeople. They just have employees that are, effectively, they call them consultants that will help you answer questions about their products. You don't even have to interact with your children at the store, because we'll take care of them in their play area. Enable customers to bring things, do things themselves. They provide them with resources and technologies. And finally, they extend it outside the firm. They can arrange delivery and assembly services. So I think IKEA is a good example of a firm that really seems to understand these types of concepts. Lean service, again, just to summarize, is not about just cutting down and cutting costs and cutting employee positions and so forth. It's about shifting from a focus on what's strategic, those things that are value-adding to our customers, eliminating other things, sometimes by turning the other needs over to customers themselves or to other partner firms that can help meet those needs. And that's lean service.
We love education in America.